I feel like Cory Booker is always desperate to be in the news. He doesn't care if it's good press, bad press. He doesn't care if people are making fun of him. He tries to grandstand. Like you retweeted that thing the other day. He looks like he's perpetually auditioning for Hamilton, right? And he's gotten on everybody's nerves, right? Because he's like a number one AIPAC Democrat. He was happy to go meet with Benjamin Netanyahu when he came to America. He'll do all of these things. And Mehdi Hasan actually raised a pretty interesting point on Twitter. A lot of people, Kyle Kulinski being an early champion of it, right, on whether or not Jon Stewart should run for president. Mehdi says whether or not Jon Stewart should run for president in 2028, and he didn't say no in his interview with me for his weekly show pod. He should definitely primary Senator Cory Booker in his state of New Jersey next year. Now, I don't know if Jon Stewart would have any interest in being a senator, but I will tell you, I think he could crush Cory Booker in a primary, and I think he could handedly win a general election in a Senate race in New Jersey. Do you think that there's any possibility that that's something that happens?
I think there is a possibility. Yeah, I definitely think it's, it would be easy for Jon Stewart to pull off. I brought up Al Franken earlier and how he succeeded in the same way that Jon Stewart could succeed if he wanted to in politics. Now, obviously, Jon Stewart hopefully wouldn't get like canceled over that, stupid joke or whatever cringy shit that came up from Al Franken's past that ended up, forcing him to resign a couple of years later. But, I think Jon Stewart has a very similar path available to him if he decides to take it. And not just was Al Franken a popular senator, but before he got canceled, people were talking about how he could run for president. Zach, he was actually considered a rising star in the Democratic Party and one that was considered, charismatic and funny and articulate enough to actually potentially run for president. So yeah, why not? If I was Jon Stewart at this stage in my life, obviously, he's already proven himself in the role on the Daily Show and that kind of stuff. He tried to be a film director, didn't really work out for him.
Rosewater,
Yeah, he made this movie called Rosewater, which no one really cared about. Then he made another movie with Steve Carell that I was actually excited for, but that also no one cared about. It got like very middling reviews. Basically, no one even knows it exists. No one talked about it at the time. No one praised it. So I think he genuinely wanted to become a filmmaker. But now that he's had two flops and two movies that no one gave a fuck about, he's probably like, well, I guess I'm probably not going to go back to that. I failed there. So what does that leave him? I think it leaves him with let's get into politics in this stage of my life. Where else do you go if you're Jon Stewart? But take Washington. I think that's exactly what he should do. Now, whether he will do it, that's another question. Obviously, Jon Stewart probably has a really nice life. He probably, has a great gig with the Daily Show and his podcast, and he's, working on his own terms. Not a lot of people telling him no. If he jumps into politics, all of a sudden it's going to be a different game, even though I think he would do really well. That's a lot of stress. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of time commitments. That's a lot of traveling. That's a lot of deranged shit you have to hear from random people and people digging up random shit. Like I said, look at Al Franken. So I don't know. Do you think he's actually going to get involved?
Yeah, I think he raised a lot of good points. Not for nothing, he's way more famous and recognizable than Al Franken. Al Franken was famous. He was on SNL. He was friends with a lot of really famous people. Jon Stewart himself is a household name that everybody knows, everybody recognizes, and he's been that way for a long time. I think being a fixture of American public life is such almost a shoo-in in 2025 for running for office. So I completely agree. It's a matter of if he would do it or not. I think the best argument for, maybe he'll give this a shot is that he did retire completely from the Daily Show for a while, right? And I remember it was very shocking. Everybody was really disappointed, and it was like, like now we're going to have Trevor Noah, and Trevor Noah is not going to be as good. And he did a lot of interviews where he talked about how, hey, like, doing the Daily Show for me was 20 years of every single fucking day. I was thinking about the Daily Show. I was following the news. I was writing jokes. I was in my writer's room. I was thinking about this every single fucking day. And I was recording after school and during dinner time for my kids. And he was like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to enjoy the last amount of time that I have with my kids. I want to sit down at the table with them. I want to drop them off at school. I want to have that time. Well, that was a while ago. And clearly, he got tired of sitting on his hands, right? He was like, okay, I want to come back at least one day a week, right? But once you start itching, you start scratching, right? You used to only do a little till a little wouldn't do it. So a little got more and more. You know what I mean? That's what I feel like is happening with Jon Stewart. And here's another thing about Jon. Before he sat behind a desk on camera every single night for 20 years, this dude was a touring stand-up comedian. right? He was a touring stand-up comedian. So what's he accustomed to doing? He's accustomed to traveling around all the fucking time, having a crazy schedule, and getting up in front of a microphone and relating to people, right? So he has all of the skills. He probably enjoys the thrill. And if he gets an urge to relive some of his glory days as a touring comic, why not do it as a senator of the United States or a candidate for senator of the United States? And he could even be a one-term senator. He could be like, guys, I'm going in there. I want to do 6 years. I want to see what I can accomplish for the people of New Jersey. I want to set an example for people to how you can conduct yourself. And he can also point to his history of really working to get legislation passed. His commitment to 9/11 first responders, which everybody's familiar with. The activism that I'm sure he's done in private that people aren't familiar with. He could talk about that too. Man, I would be so excited if he decided to primary Cory Booker. Not only because Cory Booker sucks, but I think Jon Stewart would actually be really good in the Senate.
I do too. That being said, I kind of feel like we're at a point in American politics that that's not big enough. He should run for president. I don't think that he should waste any time running for the fucking Senate so that he can be 1 out of 100 dudes. Like what the fuck is the point? You're Jon Stewart, bro. You could become the Democratic nominee. Are you kidding me? Like obviously I'd love Jon Stewart to run against Cory Booker. Cory Booker is one of the most annoying, fucking insufferable liberals. It would be amazing if someone like Jon Stewart took him out. But I also can't lie, if he announced something like that, I would be a little bit disappointed that he's not just going for the real meal deal. You know what I'm saying? Strike while the iron is hot. And I don't think there's anyone in the field that even comes close to his talents or his level of relatability, not just to people on the left, but to mainstream liberals. He really does have that perfect kind of ability to connect with everyone in the Democratic Party tent, while still being, totally credible as someone on the left, at least in my opinion. I mean, he's not exactly like, I don't think he's a DSA member or whatever, but I really trust this man's political convictions, and 9 times out of the 10, he's been on the right side of things. So I think he would be a great candidate were he to actually run for president. I think that Donald Trump is proof that you don't need any prior political experience. In fact, people kind of like when you don't, because you can be like, yo, I'm coming in here to bust shit up. I haven't been seeping in this, swamp water. I don't care about all these rules. I don't, know the parliamentarian. I don't give a fuck about the parliamentarian. I'm coming in here to break some shit up. And I think people would appreciate that energy. I think it's a right moment for the Democratic Party to kind of reunify behind a bold leader, someone with a vision. And again, I just, I don't think Jon Stewart in the Senate would be able to make as much of a difference as I want him to be able to make.
No, I mean, look, listen, I totally agree with you that there is not a single person who will enter the Democratic primary for president that could perform better than Jon Stewart. So my analysis would be, I hope he does that. I think that maybe there's just a slightly more realistic chance that he runs for Senate. I just think it seems like less of a daunting thing. I feel like Jon Stewart's the kind of guy who might not have the huge, sick, raging ego that would inspire somebody to just be like, I have never been in politics before, let me run for president, right? I think that one of the things that allowed Trump to do that, one of the things that allowed a guy like Howard Schultz, who was totally delusional, to be like, well, if I get in the race, it's over for everyone else, even though he's polling at like 1%. I just don't think that Jon Stewart, and this is an admirable quality, of course, he doesn't have that level of hubris. He doesn't have that level of narcissism where he would just be like, oh yeah, you know what? The world needs me. I'll save them. You know what I mean? And I think that I would be slightly more convinced that he would decide to run for Senate. But if he could be pressed, if he could be, pressured by the public, called upon to do this, I think that would go a long way with the guy. I think if he felt like there was a demand for him to run for president and that him deciding not to do it was going to put the country in a worse place, then you could start to work with the guy, right? But I think he would have to feel like there is a strong demand from people for him to run for president, because I think he would also worry about stepping on somebody like AOC's toes, stepping on somebody else who he feels is more qualified for the job's toes. I do worry he would think that.
I don't think he gives a fuck about any of those people. I don't think I think Jon Stewart, he's a nice guy, I'm sure, but I'm sure he also feels like, if he were to jump in the race, that he would be the guy for the job. I don't think he'd be worried about like, oh, am I going to offend the other people in the race? That being said, there is someone, Zach, who I just noticed was apparently calling on Jon Stewart to run. I just saw this cross my Twitter timeline. And it's kind of interesting because this is not someone that I was expecting to necessarily be on Team Jon Stewart, but it does signal that Jon Stewart could have quite appeal, not just with people like us, but also with that Rogan sphere of the Andrew Schultz type that we talk about, unfortunately, having a lot of sway and influence now in politics. So here's Mehdi, reiterating his call for Jon Stewart to run for Senate in New Jersey and primary Cory Booker. But let's take a listen to what Dave Chappelle apparently just said to Jon Stewart.
You are a cure to what ails our culture. You are a voice that people consistently trust. I wish that you run for president.
Wow.
I'm not even sure what the context of this was. Like, I don't know.
I think it was the Mark Twain Award.
Okay, gotcha. So that wasn't like just recently.
No, it was a little bit ago.
Gotcha. I do remember that though, when that happened. Either way, I think that's proof. Again, not that I really give a fuck about, who Dave Chappelle supports. I think the last guy he supported was like Andrew Yang or something. But it's proof that if Jon Stewart ran, he would be the kind of Democrat or liberal or left wing or whatever that would not necessarily turn off independence. He doesn't come off like a moralizer. He doesn't come off like a woke scold or whatever. So I don't know. I think if he wanted to run, I'm not saying the nomination would be his to lose, but it would be pretty easy for him to secure that motherfucker.
Here's the last point I'll raise, because I want everything that you're saying to be true, right? I do worry that he's a little more, concerned with what people think and, how other people would feel than you are, but I hope you're right. My last little concern, because I think senators can get away with this, but it is really, really hard to get away with if you're running for president, right? Are you ready? Are you ready, guys? I'm taller than Jon Stewart. And I've always been under the firm belief that you have to be at least like 6 foot to be an American president in the television era. That's how we've always done things since then. And people would talk about this guy being a short guy a lot.
I don't know. I think Jon Stewart has big dick energy, and
he does have big dick energy.
I think that matters more than height. Honestly, I think height's a little bit overrated. I don't even fucking ever notice it. Some people get so obsessed about it. I'm like, who the fuck cares?
People were trolling Ron DeSantis about it all the time.
That's true. Yeah, but that's because DeSantis did not have big dick energy. You know what I'm saying? He really embodied the kind of short guy who's like insecure. That's why he wore those fucking boots. You know what I'm saying? I think that
Jon Stewart looks like a Converse guy to me.
I also think that there's something about comedians and being a little bit shorter and smaller and, scrappier, a little bit of a, underdog comedian type. I think, Stuart Little Mopo just said that he could lean into it, if anything. And I think that, I don't know. I don't think it's an issue for Jon Stewart. I think for some guys it is, like Ron DeSantis, because again, they just can't stop fucking obsessing over their insecurity, which would lead you to wear heels out on stage, disguised as boots. But I don't think that it would hold Jon Stewart back that much.
No, I was mostly kidding, but it was something that I thought about, because I was like, Jon Stewart's like my size, like he's about my height, like people are going to bring that up, but that would honestly potentially really backfire against the Republican Party too. They would be like, we don't give a fuck about this. Like, your guy just literally raped children. Like your guy was literally a pedophile protector. And that's the other thing that Jon Stewart would have that nobody else on the Democratic, party ticket potential candidate could have. And that's the ability to just savage his opponent. Do you think that anybody could stand across and debate Jon Stewart? He would tear them down completely. He would completely flip the script on them. What Donald Trump was able to do to the Democrats was try and throw barbs at them. Oh, I'm going to castigate you on stage. I'm going to make you look like an idiot. Do you think JD Vance would have a chance in hell at coming out looking like a victor in a battle of wits on stage with a microphone? Or
not even that. Think about the shit-lib Democrats like Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris or whoever tries to run in the establishment lane. Imagine for a second any of those people trying to woke scold Jon Stewart or call him an anti-Semite because he's saying something sensible
he's a Jewish man
about Israel. Exactly.
Yeah.
It would be impossible to fucking criticize him on those grounds. And again, he's a comedian. So I feel like if you're a comedian, you just get away with a lot of things that normal politicians don't. If you're someone like fucking John Ossoff or whatever, who spent the last 5 years being all like, I'm a clean cut woke Democrat, then if they find anything that guy's ever said, they can maybe use it to help take him down if they need to, or whatever. John Ossoff was a weird example, but Jon Stewart, I feel like because he's a comedian, he's not a politician. what are they going to do? Find some offensive joke he made 10 years ago? Like, no, it's not. It's going to fucking bounce right off of him. That's one of the real appealing qualities of having someone like a comedian in that role. And also Jon Stewart just understands television. I think that's like one of the main fucking talents of Donald Trump, one of the main attributes of Donald Trump. It's not even just his charisma and his personality, because lots of politicians are charismatic and lots of them have personality, specifically in one-on-one settings. Almost every politician does. That's how they got to where they are. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're good at the handshaking and the meeting and greeting, and they walk in a room and everyone pays attention to them, right? Even the kind of, terrible politicians you could say that about. But it's a whole different thing to understand TV and the internet. And Donald Trump definitely did. Him being on The Apprentice is easily, the reason why he was able to succeed in that nomination, or in that primary.
100%.
He gained so many skills. He understands the way people view this stuff. He understands reality TV, and he understands how to make a headline. And I think Jon Stewart does too.
Oh yeah. Is Jon Stewart the liberal Joe Rogan?
Perhaps. Hopefully he's a liberal Donald Trump, because we need a fucking president, not a shithead podcaster.
Yeah. I really, really hope that we get a Jon Stewart Democratic Party ticket in 2028. That would be incredible. And then it would honestly open the door for AOC to primary Chuck Schumer and take his Senate seat, which honestly would still be a net win in the Senate.
Yeah.
Look out the door if you hear an ambulance. The Vanguard will be there.